On today's episode of Gathering the Kings.
Piece of advice after this many years, I wish I would have done it earlier. So get out
Yeah.
there and take the risk if you've got it. If you've got it in you to do it sooner rather than later. I looked for 5 years to buy a
Wow.
company.
What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe, Gathering the Kings podcast, coming back to you today with another king on the stage, my brother Greg Satterwhite. How we doing?
I'm doing great. How are you? How's everybody out there in the audience?
We're crushing. It's Monday. Well, who knows actually when this recording's gonna go out, but right now it's Monday.
Monday
And
is
you
final tax day when taxes are due today.
That's right. That's
For
right.
those
Yeah, I
who
had
are
to
late like me.
had to hurry up quick and finish those on Friday.
All right.
But for all of the extenders out there like you and me, hopefully they got through that this weekend. But Greg, tell us what kind of business that you got, my man.
So the business is called Outhouse Tickets. A little bit of a story behind the name there, but we work with venues, small, medium-sized venues, festivals, events, anybody really who needs to sell tickets online. We've got the back end, all the software and everything. We do ticketing, get people in the door, ticket scanners, things like that. So in short,
Love it.
we help you sell tickets and get people through the door.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that a lot of your stuff is in the Midwest, but you're nationwide. But I know that you're in Dallas, I'm in Kansas City, and it's a little bit of your sweet spot, right?
Yeah, I mean, the business started in Texas,
Okay.
and so it kinda grew. The I bought the company about 7 years ago, so I've been at it a little over 7 years now. The guy who started it was in East Texas, and it just kinda grew from there, so it moved east a little bit, and it moved into Louisiana, moved all across Texas. I moved up through going, up through Texas and into Nebraska, got some customers in New York. I haven't moved very far west, so,
Okay.
yeah, we're kind of on the, central and then moving east and got some all the way up in Minnesota and Wisconsin and all kinds of customers, so it's great.
Yeah, I've got to get you. One of my peer-to-peer mastermind members is building an event space in Medina, Minnesota,
Perfect.
and he actually has kind of a unique spin on that. He's building an NFT project around it as well, but he's definitely going to need an opportunity to help grow tickets or ticket sales. And so, I guess if the listener is in the West
Yeah,
and they have a venue, or if they know people in the venue, they should look you up. But
that's true. I'd love to move west too.
that's awesome. Well, so you help venues sell tickets, and that's a fun business, I'm sure. It's a lot going on, a lot of marketing, a lot of streamlining and systems. But the one thing that you just said was that you bought the business. And I
Yeah.
know that there's some unique pieces of that story I want to get to. Before we do, though, tell us why you're in business. Like, why are you an entrepreneur? Why did you buy a business? What's the deep seated, like, what's in it for Greg?
Yeah. What's in it for me was just wanting to do my own thing. So, mm, I guess when I was in college back in the day, 19, I graduated undergrad in 97. So it ages me a little bit there. I, was having ideas all the time. One of the summers, I worked for an apartment locator service. I was an apartment locator. This was pre-internet days, and you couldn't just go online and look up an apartment. And I said I went to work for these folks. They didn't have anything online, didn't even have spreadsheets with anything. You had to call up every apartment in town to figure out what their availability is. So I
Yeah.
built a database and like helped everybody in the office like have all their information available. And fast forward a few years, I worked in sales for a couple of years after that, got a little more entrepreneurial bug doing that. Had
Yeah.
one of the guys I was selling something to, they were all small businesses, and he encouraged me to start, had a marketing degree. He encouraged me to start like a little advertising marketing firm, and he was my first customer. So that was the kind of the first entree into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Did that on the side while I was also out there selling office equipment,
Yeah.
and which was a miserable job, by the way. And then so worked for a couple of years and then went to grad school, got an MBA. Soon after that, and being around lots of business-minded people was super cool. That's, you're just always throwing out ideas and you're always talking about stuff. I heard an ad for a company it was an apartment locator that would move you for free. You use them as their locator and I thought, and then they'll, send out a mover and move your stuff. I'm like, wow, that's a
Yeah.
fantastic idea. I already know that apartment locating business. So I
Right.
started a business. This was after I already had a job. I didn't want to be in the moving business. That sounded like a real hassle. So I thought, well, I'm a recent graduate. Money's more important to me than, I can grab a bunch of guys and a case of beer and we can go move my stuff from one apartment to the next. So I started a company called freerentmoney.com. This was like in 99 or maybe 2000. So a long
Wow.
time ago, and started an online apartment locator service where I give you money back. So that was kind of really that was where I
Yeah.
got back into entrepreneurship and
Yeah.
moved on around there and just did that on the side. That was a side gig for a number of years. Got out of that business finally while I was still working for working in corporate. And then I stayed in corporate America for a long time, 15 years, just got really burned out. Why I'm doing what I'm doing because I just got tired of working for the man.
Yeah. Yeah. It was funny. I was just going through some marketing stuff for Gathering the Kings and was kind of surveying a couple of our members, and not everybody, but there's a lot of people like you and me who, you spend time for whether it's whether it's a couple of months or several decades working for somebody else, and you're like, I think I can do this myself,
Yeah,
or I
yeah,
think I can do it better is
right,
maybe
right.
another
Yeah,
response. So
well,
I think the listeners are going to relate to that.
yeah, so then I was in the telecom industry for a long time and then went through a big layoff in around 2010, I guess. A giant company I worked for went bankrupt, and so got a job right after that. It only took me about a month. So I was in a position where I had a mortgage, had kids, cars, wife, and couldn't just quit having an income. So
Yeah.
I started looking for a company to buy and figured out a way to fund that. And we can talk about that whenever you want. But for 5 years, the people I was working for probably don't want to hear this. I was looking for different companies to buy, so I'd spend
Yeah.
part of my day sitting at my desk going through basically doing due diligence on companies for sale. I looked at everything from gas stations to restaurants to dry cleaners, looked at everything, and then ran across this business, Outhouse Tickets, and it was in the music industry, which I thought was cool. I grew up playing the drums. I was always in a band, and my dad used to joke, "Well, I'm going to drive your limo around, and when you're out touring as a musician."
Yeah.
Never made it as a musician, but ran across this business, thought I can handle the technology, sounds relatively simple. In the
Yeah.
music biz, sounds like fun. And, took the leap of faith and quit my job, borrowed a bunch of money and been at it for 7 years
Burn the
now.
ships, and you've been at it ever since. There's so many pieces of the story that I love, and I don't want to spend a ton of time here, but I think that everything that you've just displayed is in some way, form, or fashion, the entrepreneurial journey or the American dream when it comes to business. It's this realization that I can do this, and so we typically start with a side hustle, and really all that is really just a frustration because it tickles the itch, but it doesn't actually get us there, right? That's what I heard you say is that
Right.
you
It
know
made a
the
car
longer,
payment. That's about all it did.
yeah, exactly, yeah. The longer you spent in corporate America was the more pressure that you put on yourself of like, oh, I know I can do this myself. The cool thing that you just said though is that you buying the business was an easier way for you to justify making that leap, even though you had to go borrow a bunch of money, which I'm sure we'll get to, and you still had a bunch of risk that you were taking. But for you, very similar to my story, is that you transitioned by looking for a business and then purchasing the first business. Give us a little bit more there. Why purchasing? How did you even come to that realization that buying was a better option than just starting?
Yeah, good question. So, because I had lots of responsibilities and financial responsibilities, I and that's the reason that I wanted to buy something instead of starting something is I wasn't risky enough to just quit, start something. And I didn't really have any great ideas to start something at that
Sure.
time. And so that's kind of
Yeah.
the point here is you don't have to have a big stellar idea and a brand new product or anything like that. But I looked at how much money I needed to live on. I started looking at businesses that after the financing and after the expenses had enough income already. So it had to have a high enough income profitability that after all my debt payments that I was about to get into, they would cover all that and still pay me. And I have a wonderful wife, and she said, we still gotta maintain where we're
Yeah.
at. And so that was kind of one of the larger criteria was to make sure that that cash flow was high enough. And that's where I started weeding out all the different companies. Like they make
Yeah.
X amount of money. I've got to be able to pay myself X amount. And so that was kind of that, a lot of the due diligence was first
Yeah.
just finding one of the high enough cash flow and making sure I could borrow enough. Because it couldn't be too huge. I didn't have a ton of money and couldn't borrow that much. So set that criteria in place and then just
Right.
started looked at a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. I think that there's a cool piece, a part of the story, again, that's very similar to mine, where, the obligations that you had kind of forced you to think, "How do I purchase something already winning?"
Yeah.
And but at the same time, both of us constrained by, "I wanna buy something that has cash flow, but I can't go buy a 10,000,000 or $100,000,000 business. It's still gotta be within the means that I have," the humble beginnings, right?
Right. Right.
And so I think that the awareness or the enlightenment here for the listener is that these deals do exist. Now, mine was a franchise, probably a smaller entry than what you did, maybe, but regardless, it's whether a franchise, not franchise, certain type of industry or not. What I'm hearing you say, the same thing that I was calculating was, what's the business? How long has it been, winning or
Right.
steady or whatever word you want to put in there? What's the cash flow and does it work for our situation?
Yeah.
'Cause very similar to you, I looked at pretty much everything. And so, was there a specific industry that you were looking for, or was it just strictly kinda numbers, and then when one kinda more unique that fit what you were looking for popped out, was like, "Oh, wow, this would really make sense."
It was more the latter there. Like I said, I looked at everything. I looked at franchises. I almost bought a frozen yogurt franchise. When the
I think you and about 1,300,000 other people
Yeah,
almost bought a yogurt.
when the frozen yogurt craze was booming,
Uh,
I was looking at that. I was to the point of trying to find real estate and everything. I think every single location I looked at already had 2 or 3 other frozen yogurt places looking at
yeah,
that specific location, and at that point, I said, "I think the market's gonna get a little saturated, and I don't wanna be
yeah.
in it," and it wasn't really a long-standing business model, even though I knew a bunch of them that were making a lot of money and did extremely well, and now
Probably not now, though.
they've all faded away.
It's
So
ice cream is a hilarious business, or I guess really desserts, because if you just look back, it just goes from kinda one new idea to another, you know?
yeah.
Once you realize that, you're like, "Oh, okay, I see it." Like, if you're gonna play that business, you're playing a 3 to 7-year run. Hey, kings and queens, Chaz Wolfe. I wanna talk to you about something that's super important to me. We put a lot of time and effort, we meaning myself and my team, into this podcast, into the content that goes out every single day. And if you have been getting any sort of value or insight from this, we want it to be able to reach other business owners too. So we would love if you would like, comment, share, leave a review, post, share again, all of the things on social media, on all the different platforms, or even on the podcast mediums of Apple and Spotify. We would love to be able to get our content into more hands, more entrepreneurs, so they can grow their business as quick as possible. Together, we are building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are committed to growing their businesses to new heights. So let's do this. Let's help each other. Let's help each other grow.
So I guess your question was around, was it just a cash flow question
Right.
or was it, what did I wanna do?
Yeah.
And, I found some other businesses that had good cash flow and that I could afford, but they didn't really click. One of them
Yeah.
was like an IT company and they sold to school districts. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of working with the government. I don't really want to work with the government and deal with contracts and stuff like that and convenience stores, everything, just nothing really clicked. And so
Yeah.
it had to be something that at least I could resonate with personally. This one, Outhouse Tickets, it basically didn't have any employees. So, and that was not necessarily important to me, but I never had been much of a people manager. So it kind of was important to me that I don't really have to manage a lot of people. We've got
Yeah.
software developers and
Who
now,
are who are robots anyway, right?
well, they will be soon anyway, right?
Yeah.
And, since then I've hired some people because the business has grown quite a bit and, I just couldn't do it all myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's part of my story was I was always a do it myself kind of guy. That's the way I grew up. My dad was always like, yep, you can fix it. You can just fix it yourself. And
Yeah.
it's been a blessing and a curse
Yeah.
because, I tend to take that on almost no matter what the situation. I can
That's
do it
right.
myself. And that's a bit of advice that I would like to offer to other entrepreneurs or anybody out there. there's somebody else who knows more than you do, smarter than you at some aspect of whatever you're doing. And so that's why I think being in a community is really important to get those ideas, to learn from others. If I think one of your questions you're probably going to ask me is what was a bad decision I've made? And
Yeah.
I I struggle with saying I've made a bad decision because
Sure.
I couldn't really think back to things that I've done where, oh man, that just failed or something like that. But it's that lack of making a decision, lack of
Mm.
moving forward. From the beginning, I should have hired some sort of at least a bookkeeper. Even though I've got an MBA, I know all the financial stuff. I don't like doing it. So the stuff you don't like to do, hire people for it. Hire a CFO or a CFO service or something. And, so those lack of making decisions that I think have probably hindered my growth a little bit,
Yeah.
probably hindered profitability. I won't really know until I actually do hire some sort of a CFO.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's, the small-mindedness, right, or the stagnation of growth can be tied a lot to either hesitation or lack of decision making or just lack of big moves, right? And
Mhm.
especially when you said you bought a company that had no employees, I'm sure that was a wave of like, like, why would I want
Mhm.
to hire anybody else? Because
Yeah.
A, I can do it myself because that's what you learn from your pop, but also then why would I want the stress of having somebody else? And those things are accurate. I've talked to business owners for a couple of decades now, and it's like, well, why would I want to grow when there's just a bunch of headache? And I get that, but I think the headache of staying small, everything that you just said, doing it yourself, doing the things that you don't like to do, that headache is way worse than hiring people, man. Like, all the things that maybe you said that were maybe not in your wheelhouse to begin with. So being that
Yeah.
that's been some of your struggle, I mean, okay, so hiring the accountant, for example, or, other people that maybe you've brought onto your team, even the software developers. I mean, they're not going to be completely removed by AI, but they're going to be the ones who run AI, you know?
Mhm, mhm.
That's still people management. That's still big decisions that you've got to make, And
Yeah.
so I guess what's the caveat here that now that you've kind of been on the small made made some of those bigger moves, why would somebody listening right now who has that older thinking that you used to have of maybe I'll just do it myself, why
Yeah.
why why should they change that thinking?
Um, well, it was best decision I ever made was hiring somebody to do a lot of the tactical stuff.
Sure.
So it frees you up to think about making the bigger decisions. So think about
Yeah.
if you want to grow, how you're going to grow. But when you get so into the mire and you're just doing the day-to-day operations of the business, it just doesn't give you time to do that. So it really, once you get people on board, if you get good people, that's a really it's hard to do, but when you find the right person, take care of them, make sure they're happy, and they'll end up making you happy, which, ends up helping you grow, helping you think about other people, helping you serve your customers. That's a huge aspect of our business is
Yeah.
one thing that sets us apart really from other ticket companies. There's a lot of ticket companies out there, and a lot of them are just like do-it-yourself companies. You get online, if you're throwing a backyard party, you can get online and create your own event. A lot of people have probably
Right.
done that. But the customers that I cater to are these small to medium-sized venues that are not necessarily in the cities. They're more out in the country. We work with saloons and dance halls and, backyard barbecue joints that have big outdoor venues and stages. And they like somebody else doing it for them because they don't have the
Right.
time. They've learned they don't want to do it themselves, and they may
That's
not
right.
have the younger people because they're not in the middle of a big city. Some of the
Right.
more technologically advanced kids that are going to in and they love getting online and doing all that stuff. They
Yeah.
like it that we take that off their plate, and and the way the business has grown is through those relationships. So
Right.
I know almost every one of my customers. I work with hundreds of venues and I go visit them. That's one of the more enjoyable parts of my job is I don't get out enough, but I'll hop in the car, hop on a plane. I can go into Nashville in about a week. I'm going to go see some customers, meet some of the venues out there that I haven't met
That's
and
cool.
just spending time with them, getting to know them better, seeing their venue. And that way I can service the ticket buyer better
Yeah.
because then they come asking me questions like, "Oh, well, how do I get in? What's the seating like here?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I've been there." And
Right.
you're just not going to find that with, I don't know of any other ticket company that really does that. So it's
Yeah.
just that's kind of what sets us apart is the relationships I have with the
Love that.
manufacturer.
I think that I mean, there's several pieces here that you're given that are just really valuable. I hope the listener's paying attention to you, but the it's like the Matrix or like the Catch 22. Every business owner has a service or a product that alleviates something or a problem, solves a problem for someone else. And so even if it's like, okay, I'm a garage door guy who comes in and services a homeowner's garage door. Well, he could do it. The homeowner could do it, but he doesn't. He takes that off his plate and gives it to a specialist or someone who can maybe do it faster, better, stronger. And so as an entrepreneur, somehow we start out thinking, well, I just have to do it all myself. And for some businesses and for some length of time, you kind of have to kind of bootstrap things together.
Yeah,
But the quicker the better. What I'm hearing from your story is if every service, every business owner who's listening right now, they alleviate things for other people. Well, it's like, well, you have to do the same thing for you, whether I'm a
that's it.
small venue and I hire Greg to come in and sell tickets for me, or whether I'm a mastermind group that works with, an advertising agency or a venue. Like there's things that alleviate our plate, whether that's hiring or working with a third party source or whatever. So I think it's the catch 22 because we find ourselves trying to do it all ourselves,
Mhm, yeah.
which is the exact reason, well, the exact opposite reason why we're in business because we sell our service or our thing to alleviate or solve a problem for somebody else. So they're doing it. We're selling our service to them to do it, but we don't do it for ourselves. Is that right?
That's what business is. That's all business is serving someone else something that either they can't do themselves or don't want to do themselves. I mean, what
Yeah. So like the ultimate peak performance, what I'm hearing from your story is like, how do I apply that to me, right? And so for you, it was hiring and offloading a few of these things. What would you say now, like how that you've kind of known this for a while and you've been successfully, whether it be hiring or collaborating, even like you said, mentioned getting in a room where there's other ideas from other people. How do you do that now at your level of success versus at the beginning? It was just like, oh my gosh, I'm scared. I'm going to make my first hire. You know what I mean?
here's the takeaway that I've learned. Make that decision in less of a reactionary way, but more in a proactive way. So instead of avoiding it as long as you can, think about those upcoming needs as you see the growth starting to happen, plan for it, get the people in place. It's hard because you can't necessarily afford it, but thinking about what you're going to need and be ready for that. So when that next level of revenue hits, go ahead and hire somebody,
Yeah.
take the risk and get somebody on board to help, whether it's even like a virtual assistant or, just somebody, even a secretary. I don't have a secretary, but somebody to help you do things. If you're starting to get so busy, hire an assistant to help you plan your schedule out. Just I think it's just being proactive rather than reactive. And when you're a smaller company and you don't have the revenue to pay for it, then it's hard to be proactive because you may not have the money to do it. So being ready
Yeah.
for it and then doing it before maybe you get sucked into making more money and then having to part with it is, not necessarily the easiest thing. So
You just gave really two amazing principles. I want to just piggyback off of your preparation. It's interesting as you're preparing for that next level, like you're saying. It's funny as you're preparing, you're thinking about it and you're like bringing it to you because if you're never preparing for growth, guess what happens? You never
yeah,
grow.
downgrade.
Yeah, because you're not thinking about what that looks like or what moves you would make or what hires you would make or what money you would need. Even like you said, even if you don't have the money now, you're still thinking as if, okay, well, what if it were to happen in the next 30, 60, 90 days, 3 years even? Like maybe I can't hire anybody, but what it looks like when I can, here's the plan. And so those thoughts towards growth then start putting action subconsciously even into motion, which then eventually brings the growth. And so I think everything that's what you're saying is spot on here. The good decision, I know you kind of mentioned at the beginning about how you funded this business. I kind of want to get into this. You've got a little bit of of some, trade secrets, if you will, just
Mhm.
some information that could be very helpful to the audience. And so you're coming from a corporate background. You can't just, you know, take millions of dollars out of your current business or your savings account. You had to get creative. So tell us about that amazing decision, which ended up allowing you to buy the business
Yeah.
and then have a successful business.
Yeah. So when I was looking for how to buy a business, first of all, I ran across a funding method. It's an acronym spelled ROBS, ROBS. Maybe that's a a bad acronym, but and I don't remember what it stands for.
Don't
But
rob a bank. Okay.
yeah, yeah, right. It's sort of governmental and kind of tax related program where basically you can take money from your existing retirement account. So I'd been in corporate for over 15 years. So I'd been putting money into a 401k. And normally you take that out and you get punished for the
Yeah.
tax reasons. But with the ROBS, you can use some or all of your retirement money if you're willing to take that risk and use it to either start a company or buy a company. And it happens by you have to create a C corp, and you create a C corp which is owned by a 401k. So you create a 401k yourself, take some money out of your current 401k, move it into that 401k, and that's how you can either start a business or buy a business. And in my case, I used that money as basically down payment on an SBA loan. So I took out
Yeah.
money from my existing 401k and basically borrowed against myself,
Yeah.
and then also got an SBA loan, and then also borrowed money from the seller. So, there's lots of different ways to buy and fund a business. And that's the way I did it, was because I had some retirement money, was willing to risk it due to the cash flow that I analyzed ahead of time, and planned on, all right, I'm going to have to make X number of dollars to pay the SBA. Got to make X number of dollars to pay myself back from that borrowing from my 401k, essentially.
Yeah.
And you don't have to pay yourself back, but that was my
Right.
mentality.
Yeah.
I,
Good practice.
yeah, right. Still want to retire one of these days. And then, the SBA wouldn't value the business necessarily at what the seller
Right.
wanted to sell it for, which is very common, but it was growing. It had a good track record, and I was willing to take the risk. So if you're looking to buy a business and you've got some retirement money, whether it's in a IRA or a 401k or whatever, you can look up that Rob's, whatever it's called, the method to do that, and get going that way. You got to hire
Yeah.
you don't maybe not have to, but I found a company that did it all for me. It's like a big
Yeah.
law firm essentially that set it all up. So
Yeah. Move the puzzle pieces, make it legit. Again, I'm sure all those things could be done on your own, but isn't that what we just got done talking about?
yeah, exactly. Right.
First off, thanks for sharing that. I think that's super tactical for anybody who's listening, who's looking to buy a business. The SBA 7A loans is exactly what I did as well. I didn't have a 401k because I was not diligent like you and putting money away, although I didn't have quite as long of a tenure
Sounds like you were a little
either, but
younger than I was. Yeah.
probably just a little bit. But regardless, I think that it makes a lot of sense because, I think the average person that actually goes and starts a business or buys a business is in their 40s. And so there's probably people listening today who maybe already have their own business, but maybe still have a 401k that they had from previous work. And it's just kind of sitting out there and they didn't know that they could leverage it in this way.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think that's huge. I also think that the seller finance piece is not only applicable in your situation of just he wanted to value it higher than what the SBA was, which is common, like you said, but in today's environment, I mean, we're fall of 2023 right now. In the next 3 years ish, there's going to be a ton of businesses that just close because boomers are retiring and getting rid of their businesses. And so if you can find a seller who's motivated, who's willing to take on some or all of the risk, that this is happening on a regular basis every single day for entrepreneurs who are looking to either grow locations or expand into different industries. There's a lot of sellers. And so speak to that just for a half second. You don't have to give the details of the seller carry, but give maybe the motivation or what maybe the listener could be thinking about as they're maybe talking to a prospect on doing a seller finance situation or seller carry.
Yeah. Well, from the seller's perspective, he's taking a risk, he or she,
Right.
because you're gonna rely on on the person who's buying your company to pay you.
Um,
But it was about maybe a third of the value, if I think back, a little bit less than that maybe, and he thought the company was as valuable as he wanted to sell it for, and I agreed. It had good cash flow, and it met all the right multiples and all that stuff. And so then you just gotta really dig into the books and make sure that the revenue is really there. But
Right.
then, you put it in a contract, and if I didn't pay him back in the time specified, then he still had the source code of the software. It was written into the contract that he gets the business back. So it puts some pressure on you as the business buyer.
Yeah.
You gotta keep the business up or you're gonna lose it. So that was kind of the detail of it. It's like he would get the business back. And so I guess if I were to sell the company at some point, I would probably I'm sure I would have to if I sold it to an individual, I'd probably have to finance part of it as well, and that would be part of the deal.
Yeah.
You're gonna buy my company. If you don't pay me, I'm taking it back.
Yeah. 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 There's obviously all kinds of recourse that can happen there. It doesn't always have to be taking the company back, but that's an obvious one.
Yeah.
Well, why would you let the person have it if they can't make the payments?
Yeah.
Unless there's other recourse that maybe is just a better situation. But I think all that's great. What would you say to the person right now who's, sifting through businesses? I'm sure if they're listening right now, they have a business, but if they don't yet and they're thinking like you or me about leaving their job and they're looking at businesses to buy, any one last little nugget there that really helped you either find the right thing, finance the right thing, anything like that?
I mean, just look at lots of different options. I like I said, I looked at everything from franchises to convenience stores, everything.
Yeah.
But it depends on you gotta set your realistically look at what your potential budget can be and looking at using that Rob's financing or some, look at different creative ways to borrow money. You can get hard money loans, you can do all kinds of stuff if you're willing to take the risk and you know what you're going to buy has good cash flow. I made sure that it was a business that had been around for nearly 10 years before I bought it. So it had a good track record, good customers, either look just make sure you do your due diligence and look for a company that's either growing or if you know something that the seller doesn't know and you know a way to take it so that you can grow it really quickly to get it out of the gates there. Just look at that. But I was risk averse to a certain degree, which piece of advice from after this many years, I wish I would have done it earlier. So get out
Yeah.
there and take the risk if you've got it. If you've got it in you to do it sooner rather than later. I looked for 5 years to buy a
Wow.
company,
Yeah.
but it took
Yeah.
that long for me to find something that clicked. So don't go buy something that's not just for the sake of it. Look for something that you think you can enjoy because you're going to be doing it full time for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, there
And,
should be some fulfillment there.
yes, exactly. You gotta like what you're doing. You gotta like the people you're going to be working with or for.
Yeah.
And, even though I was working for somebody in the past, I don't really feel like that now, but I work for my customers.
Right.
I do. They're not a boss, but they're a blessing. We've just been
Yeah.
completely blessed to grow like we did. We went through some massive struggles in 2020, as you might imagine, with not being
Being in
able to
events.
gather in places together. A lot of places had to cancel events. I mean, one of my customers, this is the relationship I have with my customers. We had a big concert, sold out, about 5,000 people. It was on a
Wow.
Friday night. That Friday, the governor oh, yeah, no, a week before, they were starting to give warnings that you need to start reducing the number. This is in March of 2020. You got too many people coming in the door here. So they talked to the band. They split it into 2 nights, so then they only had 1,500 people, so that kinda fell or, 1,500, 2,000 people per night,
Right.
and it was gonna be a Friday and a Saturday. That day, the Friday, the governor came out and said, "No more no more gatherings." We're
Yeah.
like, "What? We got thousands of people showing up."
Right.
So they made the decision. The venue owner actually got permission from his mayor or some local politician because it's in a small town uh, that he could go ahead and have it. But he made the choice to go ahead and cancel it because he didn't want to have any repercussions of. whatever backlash there may have been. So we had to refund hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
which meant me losing a fair amount of money
Yeah.
and him losing a lot of money. But this is
Mhm.
the relationship I have with my customers. He said, I know this is going to impact you. I will pay you, me, Outhouse Tickets, the lost service fee revenue. And usually it's like I just lose the money or
Right.
I don't make it, but I do take a loss if I refund stuff. There's lots of fees and credit cards and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. But that's the level of relationship that I
Yeah.
maintain with customers. He was fantastic, great guy. Yeah, and he basically helped keep me going through 2020 by helping, he's like, I
Yeah.
don't want you to lose money because of this. Because part of it was his decision to cancel it,
Right.
but yeah,
Right.
they've got one other customer that she's awesome. She's about trying to win a Venue of the Year award, and that's one of the reasons I'm going to Nashville next week. And
Love it.
she wants to bring me up on stage, introduce me because I'm such an integral part to her business that she
Yeah.
wants to get up there and promote us just because that's my customers. Not to toot my own horn too much, but they love me. They like working with me, and that's what I think helps us thrive.
Yeah, well, I think that it's an important thing. I mean, I love that you tooted your horn there because it's important not only for maybe some of those people to hear. I'm sure they'll be listening at some point, but also for the business owner that has nothing to do with your business. They're just hearing your story. They too should have customers like this, right? And those relationships, even in the more transactional businesses. I've been even before I had my own business and I was just in sales and it was just very transactional. I stood out shoulders and a head above, not because I'm 6'5", but because I focused on the relationships. And I think that what you're saying, that principle of taking care of the other person and also then inevitably they take care of you and it becomes actually mutually benefiting. It's not just like, oh, I help you, but you've helped that dude so many times and you helped her build her business in such a grand way where they want to take care of you. They're propelled, not just want to, but they do take
Yeah.
care of you
I mean,
because you've
she's like
been taken care of.
she said, "Come to Nashville. I'll get you a hotel room. I'll buy your flight out there if you want," and it's like because I bend over backwards to serve them well,
Yeah.
a lot of them bend over backwards to serve me back, and having
Yeah.
customers like that is great. I am in a very transactional business. I mean, the sales are just going on constantly. It's essentially an online business, and I have 2 customers. I've got the ticket buyer but then it's really my venues and events,
Right.
festivals,
That
and
you're
things like
serving.
that's where the relationships come in. You can't have a relationship with hundreds of thousands of ticket buyers, but I have relationships with the hundreds and thousands of venues that I work with. And yeah, it just that's the fulfilling part of the business is getting to know these folks, going out, meeting them, hanging out with them for a day or two, going to one of their concerts. So
Right.
find something that's fulfilling to you in whatever way that is. That some people might not like that, but that's what I like it.
It's fulfilling for you. Yeah, we talk in Gathering the Kings, we talk a lot about fulfillment, and for me, what the exceptional life or being fulfilled truly is about winning in all areas, not just in business, but also, I mean, we've got other categories. There's family, there's health, there's, faith, there's all these other things that we have importance in. And so my next question for you is kind of a tangent or a connection between all this stuff that you've been talking about in business. You've been doing this for 7 years. You left your corporate career. Clearly, you're all in. You had to be all in. Like you
Yeah.
said, you had, the SBA to pay, you had yourself to pay back, you had, the seller to pay. You still had to make money for you because, wifey still
Mm,
needed to eat.
mortgage. I live in a house,
You
yeah, or
gotta, you
gotta
gotta
have
live in a
damn
house.
roof
Yeah,
over my head.
exactly. And so we know that you've been all in. We've heard that from your story. My question is, how have you also been all in on family, marriage, all of the things that are important to you as well at the same time?
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I didn't have any employees to start with, I could work at home. So I stuck around as much as I could, tried to balance my time, taking the time to spend with your family. Now I, s- my both my kids are out of the house, but my wife and I still spend a lot of time together. We take vacations and try to travel a little bit. Bought an RV so that I could still work while while we travel,
Yeah.
and that was a couple of years ago, and it was harder to travel anyway. But
Yeah.
it to me, it's important to keep those relationships with your family.
Yeah.
Talk to your family and your kids every day, but, doing just trying to don't get so sucked into your business that you're working 24 hours a day and you can't spend time with the people you love. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we just got done talking about relationships inside the business and how important those are. How much more important is it for the relationships that we live with or that
yeah.
that we birthed, you know?
If you're
Um,
not happy at home, you're not going to be happy in business. So, yeah.
that's right. How have you seen that play out, either for the good or maybe you've seen it for the bad for yourself or for other people? You know, that happy home, happy business thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a struggle, if you're in the same household with the same person all the time and you're bumping into each other all the time and you're used to being in an office where you're gone for 8 to 10 hours a day.
There's some new
Y
language that has to arrive.
Yes, exactly. So, it's it's been good overall for sure, just being able to having that flexibility. I mean, I was able to coach my son's baseball team. I could take off in the middle of the day and do whatever I wanted to do. And that's just a huge, I, like I said, do it early. If you haven't done something yet, take the leap because it ends up affording you so much flexibility in your life and in your lifestyle and that you can spend with those that you do love because that's just, you know, that's of paramount importance, really. And if
Yeah.
your family's not happy, you're not going to be happy.
Yeah, it's just really tough to show up as the, the armored, guy to win the business battle if you're battered and torn because, you didn't get
Right.
any rest at the house.
Exactly.
What do you think, as far as, like, kinda going back to our conversation a little bit ago and, making good decisions in the business, hiring, kinda taking those risks that maybe you didn't right away, but eventually you were able to, systems. How much does that play into the freedom that you really just described?
Mm.
Because there's a lot of business owners right now today that might have taken the leap, but they haven't hired, they haven't done some systems yet, and so it's very much still, got them gripped, and they can't just take off in the middle of the day. They can't just vacation whenever they want, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many of those things play a part in it?
Yeah. So I was always a very process oriented person. That was a lot of what I did in corporate was to improve processes and automate things. And I did a lot of
Okay.
that. And when I bought the company and looked at it, or when I was looking at it, I thought, yeah, I can automate a lot of this stuff. I can create some processes and free up some time. Wasn't really like that, but it was hiring somebody that really freed me up.
Yeah.
Totally allowed me to I didn't take a vacation really for 5, 6 years. Now we did, but I'd be on my phone in the morning or get on the computer in the morning and try to take care of business.
Right.
And I don't mind that so much, but being able to get away and I had for 6 or 7 years, 6 years probably, and not a day went by where I didn't do something with the business because
Yeah.
for a long time, I was just doing everything for the most part.
Yep.
But I had gotten it to the point where if I let my customers know I'm on vacation, I would still get up in the morning because I typically I get up pretty early and I could take care of a lot of the business early
Yep. Yep.
and then have free time in the days. But it never gave me that mental break I needed. So I'd say it's more important than you may realize, and
Yeah.
I still haven't completely realized it. I still don't do it enough. I don't take a complete mental break, but, being able to do that because when you work for somebody else, you can typically turn your phone off, go away
Yep.
for a week, not think about it, and then, yeah, work your rear off when you get back, but
Right.
it's that's important if you can put processes in place.
Right.
If you can systematize things, do it. My business isn't really like that because it's so relationship oriented, but it can really help if you can get processes in place. And here's an important aspect, getting those processes written down so that you can hand that over to somebody else because
Right.
if you can't verbalize it and then document it well enough that somebody else can do it, you're going to struggle one of these days when you do want to get out of the business, and you gotta be able to write stuff down, which is hard whenever I've been at it for a long time now, and I know it inside and out. Uh,
Yep,
Writing down everything I do, whew,
yep, and it's just easier just to do it.
I don't know. That's
Going back to our previous
oh,
conversation.
exactly, exactly.
So the things that give us the things that we actually want. So when we start our business, we want freedom and time with our family and money choices and money freedom and time freedom. And like every entrepreneur wants that. But what happens is that if we don't leverage systems and people and team building and all of those things that are difficult, but if we don't leverage those things, then we just keep getting stuck over and over. Eventually, it wears us out. It really turns into hopelessness. Like 72% of all entrepreneurs deal with some sort of mental health issue.
Mm,
What?
yeah.
And it's right in this moment here where you're like, I want to spend more time with my family, but I'm stuck. It's like, well, there's certain key things which obviously Greg just gave you guys quite a bit of it, as far as systems, and then earlier talking about hiring people. That pain of having to manage people, even though you said maybe I wasn't like, the best manager of people, it's worth it so that you can obsess in what I call, the 5 dimensions of kingship. But it's like family, marriage, all the other things that we're talking about, traveling, fitness, like all the I can't focus on those things if I'm stuck. And you gave us some really, really key things to be able to get unstuck. I've got one last question here for you, Greg. I want you to just roll back the clock, go back, and I want you to talk to the younger Greg, tap him on the shoulder, just what do you tell him?
Take the risk earlier. Get rid of the fear. So whatever you've got to do spiritually, emotionally, whatever's inside of you that's holding you back, figure out what that is. Yeah, for me, there was fear of failure, fear of not being able to provide, whether it was for myself or for my family.
Mhm.
Get get your head and your heart straight and forgive yourself, forgive your parents if you have to. Get all those fears out of your life, and that will free you up to then make the decision and take the leap. I know I could have succeeded at that .com that I started a long time ago, but I was afraid to do it. I knew other folks in that business who were making a ton of money back then, but I was afraid and I didn't want to take that leap. So I'd say, in a nutshell, examine your fears, figure out where they came from, forgive the person who gave them to you if that's usually the case, and take the leap, do it before you're too old to have the energy to do it, and just go for it. That's what I gotta say
Yeah.
is I wish I would have gone for it way earlier in life because it was a great decision to get out on my own.
Yeah. I love every part of that answer. It wasn't just go for it earlier. It was a very succinct, this is why you didn't.
Yeah.
And to be able to communicate that to the younger Greg who's listening right now, right? Like that's just a literal key that's going to unlock someone's success a decade sooner, 2 decades sooner, who knows? And so I am indebted to you on their behalf, for giving that to us. Greg, how can the listener, A, find you because they're a venue or they know someone who has a venue and they need to hire you to help them sell tickets? Or if they're an entrepreneur and they just want to connect with you, they're like-minded to you, they want to get to know you, how can they find you?
I'll give my email address out. It's greg@outhousetickets.com. Contact me directly if you want. For venues, events, festivals, whatever that want to find me, outhousetickets.com. We're all over the internet. You can look at the venues we deal with. You can see what kind of customers we serve and contact me. There's a contact page on the website. We're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram a little bit, but the website's really the best place to go. So, but you got my email address now. If you want to contact me directly, go for it.
That's
I
right.
love I
Well, I'm
love
sure.
talking to other business owners. Love talking to entrepreneurs, especially younger folks who are like wanting to take that
Hungry.
next step, and really
Yeah.
figure out how to go deep and do it. I love those conversations. That's part of the way I like giving back is talking to younger folks who want to do something, love talking about business and what I do and what somebody else might be wanting to do and how they can succeed. So I really enjoy that. So I'd love to talk to anybody that wants to.
Well, that position of giving back as well as everything you've done with us here today is straight from a kingly position. You are an absolute king in everything that you've been able to accomplish. Not perfect, but one that is doing it well. And we appreciate you sharing your story. I'm sure there's going to be many encouraged here listening today. So, Greg, blessings to you, your family, all the venues that you're helping this year and next. We just are so thankful that you got to be here and share your time with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.